Hi everybody, and welcome to Lady Oyster, a blog that celebrates all things oysters and the people who create a community around them. I'm Virginia Schaefer, and today we're sharing a story about someone who overcame adversity by way of an oyster farm. Some of you may know that in addition to the blog, I've been working towards publishing a book on the people pioneering the oyster industry in North America today. There's something special that happens when I conduct interviews. The stories I've been documenting unravel to other stories that I don't always anticipate hearing. The web of the oyster industry reaches further and further with every conversation, but the beauty of that is that I get to dig deep and find smaller subjects that inspire me. One of the stories I've documented for the book is Deborah Keller's. She's an oyster farmer based in Oyster Bay, Florida, near Apalachicola, and goes by Keller, but also Oyster Mom locally. "You only have one mama," she told me. Now that's a great line. Keller took her leap into oyster farming through a job training program sponsored by the Wakulla Environmental Institute. It was designed to increase jobs in the area through sustainable practices. Keller's first few years with her farm were met with a bit of trial and error while she adapted to her lease and found her own rhythm in growing oysters. But what I'm about to tell you isn't totally Keller's story. As she and I were wrapping up her interview, she paused and told me that she forgot to talk about someone important to her success when she first started out. She told me about a man named Michael. Here's Keller.
I didn't mention this. My first employee, he wasn't an employee, my first helper, he wouldn't take any money. Okay, so the very first year I had oysters, they were the school's oysters, essentially, the Wakulla Environmental Institute. My parents came down, and they were very supportive, as they've always been in my life, and interested, and I took them out in the boat on a December day that was 34 degrees. Ooh. Crystal clear blue sky, beautiful day, other than freezing cold.
Keller took her parents out on Ginny, Keller's boat.
And the next day, we had to deliver some roasted nuts to this guy whose mother lived in my parents' town, and she had given them these nuts to take down and give to Michael. Well, we go to give these nuts to Michael, and he's blind. He's 100% blind. And he had just become blind at age 54. And Mom and Dad were giddy about being out on the oyster boat, telling the story of what happened out there and everything. And Michael says, "Do you think I could do it?" I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't know, but we'll give it a try.
Long story short, Michael went out on the boat with Keller to work the farm that day. On the way home, Michael asked Keller to take him to a store. He wanted to purchase bib overalls so he could get out on the water too.
He was addicted right away.
Keller remembered when her husband Jack taught Michael how to shuck.
My husband taught him how to shuck an oyster. So this blind guy learns how to shuck an oyster, and he wouldn't take any money. I paid him in oysters. He shucked his own oysters, made amazing meals with oysters. And, so we figure if we could teach a blind guy to shuck, we can teach anybody to shuck. Michael stayed with me for a year. He had just become blind, and he was kind of depressed. And this lifted him out of depression and made him realize he could nearly live on his own, and get out and start living again. It was great. It was an incredible experience for me to learn working, and it helped me organize my farm too, because, he couldn't see anything, so I had to describe different things. It was great.
I could begin to understand how oysters, being such a delicious food, along with the farm experience of fresh air and the water, could so strongly engage Michael's senses, as it does with so many of us.
He did everything I did except for drive the boat. I did let him drive it once, but that was it. And that was fun too. But yeah, he was amazing. I just talked to him like 2 days. I talk to him regularly now. He's up in my hometown in Pennsylvania. And he hates the winter. He keeps saying, I should have stayed.
After hanging up the phone with Keller, I was fascinated by Michael's story. He went through quite a lot losing his sight later in life, and oyster farming is not an easy profession for anyone. I found it really courageous, but getting to know Keller, I could understand that she was the right person to be his partner in that journey. Keller was kind and brave herself. I decided that I wanted to hear Michael's side of the story. Despite a difficult loss, he still took advantage of an opportunity that led to a new perspective and a wonderful friendship. And that's what's special about this story. The work was the work, but his time on the lease, in his words, was therapeutic. It helped him understand that he could still achieve so much. Keller introduced me to Michael, who's now living back up north in Pennsylvania. I gave him a phone call one afternoon, and we spent almost 2 hours talking about his experience. We began the conversation with what those initial moments were like when he lost his vision. Here's Michael.
It was 2013.
2013.
November of 2013. Yeah, it was tough. I was 51, and I had changed careers at that point. Well, I was 50 when I took a new job with Hartford steam boiler, Hartford, Connecticut. So, and I had some background in mechanical, as far as boilers and pressure vessels and stuff. But I still had to go to engineering school up at Hartford. And I lived up there for a while, and it happened right when I started. So it happened in my left eye first. And what happened, I had to brush up on algebra, calculus, and all that because it's been so long since I even touched it. So I went through tutors and stuff, and it was a painless thing. My eye just kept, like there was an eyelash in my eye, and it just kept getting blurry and blurry.
Michael went through a series of tests. They tested for everything. As Michael said, he didn't feel pain, but it was very frustrating and scary. He was finally diagnosed with something called ischemic optic neuropathy, also known as ION. It's when the blood supply to the eye's optic nerve gets blocked. Your optic nerve is what sends signals to the brain, and your brain turns those signals into images that you see. With ION, the optic nerve faces irreversible damage, resulting in vision loss.
My vision's like looking through, you live in the Northeast, a frosted windshield.
So you see a little something.
Yes,
but
nothing at night.
Michael continued to tell me what he did after that happened.
Well, right after that, my dad came up from Florida and took me down to Florida. And I don't know, it was about a month or two before I got involved with a lighthouse in Tallahassee, which is a school like for the blind folks to help them get readjusted and teach them different things and how to do it. So I just did everything I could. Learned Braille, which they said people in their 50s that just lose their eyesight don't learn Braille. Well, I wanted to do everything I could to stay busy,
Prior to Michael's move to Florida, he was an avid fly fisherman and visited the Gulf quite a lot for vacation. Aside from the time he spent fishing, he loved eating oysters.
Well, I've been to Florida a lot, and I love oysters. And every time I went there, before the big hurricane wiped out all the oyster business in the Gulf, I'm talking the 80s and early 90s. We'd go down to Florida a lot, and we'd go out on the pier and sit there and eat fresh oysters and drink beers. And I just loved that. I thought, this is awesome, because you don't get that up here.
His chance encounter meeting Keller was after about a year living down in Florida and attending Lighthouse. He told me the same story that Keller had shared about their visit to drop off a few things. He continued.
When Keller and her parents came by to talk about that, and I had no idea about farming oysters at that time, because that was new for them.
Yeah,
we just started, and I thought, I'd really like to go out on a boat with you. And now, mind you, it's January, beginning of January, and it was a cold winter down there.
After Michael's stay with Keller on the boat, he decided that he wanted to get involved in the operation and stay active.
I said, I'll do what I can for you, and that's how it started. I just wanted to keep going out with her for oysters. I wanted oysters to eat.
Michael and Keller developed a routine, but it took some time getting used to. As Keller mentioned, she had to learn how to describe her gear in new ways that made sense to Michael. Michael also learned a few lessons, like the importance of wearing gloves.
What was funny about it was I sat in the back of the boat, and they would pull her first lease where her farm was the first time. It was very shallow, and you could just pull it from the boat, pull the baskets in. So my job was to sort them, try to pick out the legal size. They had to explain to me and put the legal size in my hand, but they kept telling me to wear gloves. Now, I never wore gloves, even up here, unless it was freezing cold. I needed to feel, because that was how I could see from now on, was my hands and stuff. So here I had cut myself because they were sharp, those barnacles and stuff. I had no idea. So there was, I was bleeding on my fingers, so they had to clean all that up. And, I was like, I didn't even know it. I said, well, I better get some gloves from now on. But my feel is what I went by, and that was most. And at the boat, the sensation of the boat with out in the bay, the rocking and all that. I became very adept to that, not losing my balance. I was always proud of myself. Since I lost my vision, I only fell one time, and that was in her boat. But that was like my last year there, and I stepped on a PVC pipe. We were extending the lease of the farm or something, and I went down. But that was the only time I fell.
If there was another good lesson he learned, it was finding the right shoes.
I tell you got to be careful, too. I dropped a full basket of oysters on my big toe.
Oh,
and
no.
What was I forget what I was wearing. What? Oh, just water shoes. And I had lost my big toenail then. I'm still suffering from that thing. But you have to be careful. And the Crocs are the best thing on a boat. You don't have much protection, but you have more protection than those wet shoes.
Crocs get like a bad rap when it comes to fashion, but man, they serve a purpose, don't they?
I'm wearing them now.
I asked Michael if he was ever nervous working out on the water. To this day, I still get nervous out at sea. I wondered if those thoughts crossed his mind.
That leash he had was deep, and there was times where you had to swim because you couldn't touch. And I was just always leery of sharks and stuff, or stepping on something. And I tell her, and I said, look, I'm in here, because a lot of it was the heavy work. So I did the heavy work. I said, you just keep an eye on any fins so I could jump up in a boat quick.
Michael shared with me how important it was to have his independence. He said that he never wanted to be a burden on anybody. Having that autonomy was really valuable to him, and working alongside Keller gave him more confidence that he could still live his life on his own terms.
I considered working on the oyster farm as therapy for me the whole time. I felt good doing it. I was able to do something. So that was the big thing for me. And working with Keller was a blast.
What was it? What's she like working with her?
Funny. I tell you what, she was new to it too. So, and she was new to boating. So we had our escapades. We had some stories about what happened to us out in the bay. Getting stuck, running out of gas, and me trying to fix things and I can't see. It was we laugh about it, and nobody got hurt, so that was the main thing. Being out there in storms, so we had a lot of stories. She had 2 gas tanks on the boat, and the hose was hooked to the gas tank that ran out, and we're drifting away. So, and I could not get that clipped into the full tank. It was a different type of connection.
Oh, no.
So, so I think we started pouring gas from that tank into a cup or something we had to pour. The whole time we're drifting. We don't know, I have no idea where we're going or what's going on. So, but we ended up getting back to the dock. That was the first big experience. We used to get stuck, especially in the wintertime. The tide was really low. Her lease was put on Oyster Bay. We'd go to Rock Landing. So it was quite a boat trip. You actually had to go across a little bit of the Gulf of Mexico to get to this thing, just a little channel. And we got into the Bay Area, and it was so low we got stuck. And we had to sit there for quite a while.
What did you wait till the water got back?
Yeah, she had these real expensive, fancy sunglasses that got lost. So I forget the brand name, but we named the bay after the sunglasses. You'll have to ask her about that if you talk to her again. That's just some of the things that happened to us.
I asked Keller about the sunglasses. Gucci, she told me, her only designer pair. Gucci Bay likes the finer things in life. As I continued my conversation with Michael, I soon found out that Keller and Michael weren't alone on the boat. There was another partner, a furry partner, someone who to this day follows Michael wherever he goes.
I have a guide dog.
You do?
He keeps me straight. Oh, he's the oyster dog. I'm Keller had told you about the oyster dog.
No, I didn't hear about the oyster dog.
Oh, he went with us.
What's his name?
Topper. He is a yellow lab, but he's white. He's the color of an oyster. So it was appropriate. She called him an oyster dog. But he was with us through, we went to a lot of events. And, of course, I learned how to shuck oysters, so I sit there and shuck oysters with my dog sitting there with me. And it was, you almost felt like a circus attraction there for a while, but I didn't mind.
You heard that right. Michael knows how to shuck oysters. Like Keller mentioned earlier, her husband Jack taught him. It made me laugh at how sheepish I was when I first learned how to shuck oysters. But without vision, now that's next level.
I wanted to make whatever I did, I wanted to do, and I wanted to do it well, no matter how long it took me to learn how to do it. That's just how I'm programmed.
Yeah.
So, and that's why, if I want to get an oyster, I want to be able to shuck my own oyster. Some of those beginning ones weren't very pretty, that's for sure, but the job got done.
Michael really enjoyed working with Keller. He talked to me about how much he missed it, and if he had the opportunity, he'd be right back down on the boat with her. Now that he's moved back to Pennsylvania, the pandemic has prevented him from taking the trip back down. But we talked about Keller and how she's upgraded her gear quite a bit since those early days.
She's got a new boat, a whole new process. I said, geez, how life would have been easier if we had that at the beginning. Because now she's got the tumbler on the boat and a crane to lift the basket. So I was like, Jesus, Keller.
You're like, just as I leave.
Yeah. I said, well, that's good. I mean, that's awesome. It takes time to get to that point in your business. So when she was working full time with the Nature Conservancy, we would do it after work, and of course every weekend, she had to get oysters to market. So that's when we would drive to Apalachicola, out past Apalachicola, to sell oysters to I forget who it was. I loved that road trip. I loved going out there to that guy. And, I forget. God, I wish I could remember who that was. She would know. But we sold a lot of oysters to him, and then she started getting her own processing going, and now she just sells for herself. She's very ambitious. We grew a lot of oysters, sold a lot of oysters, and she's still doing it. So my hat's off to her. She's a very free-spirited woman. That's what attracted me to her, and she just wasn't afraid of anything, wasn't afraid to do anything. Jump right in there and do it, and I thought, that's all right, I like that. I'm right there with you.
Michael went on to tell me about Apalachicola and how much he loved bar hopping, especially when his daughter came to visit. He enjoyed introducing his family to what he was doing, and they loved it. We continued to share our dreams of warmer weather and commiserated over the northern living in the winter. I could tell how much Michael missed the water. He said he's lost all of his calluses at this point, so he's definitely overdue for a trip. Michael passes much of his time with audiobooks. Native American history, biographies, anything written by Tolkien are some of his favorites. He might be the most well-read person you'll ever meet. He told me that he had to retrain himself to finish one book before starting another, and I agreed that it's something I have to get better at doing myself. Michael said that the hardest part is actually finding the book he wants to read.
Even if I know the name of the book and the author and I type that in, it'll say 650, 4,000 or whatever, and you go through two, and then you finally find it, and I can program it to download. But, I have time.
I told him that I might have a good book for him in the future, which may cover some history I think he'll enjoy. We'll see. But what I know for sure is that Michael has made his own bit of history by taking a chance one day and asking Keller for that boat ride. It's what this industry does for each other that makes a difference. You don't have to see an oyster to feel the community around it. The shared joy of the open water, the mutual love of brine, and a willingness to lend a hand and try new things will always be a part of the oyster story.